counterattacks from pro-Gaddafi forces, and now Bin Jawad apparently reclaimed by Gaddafi's army, and they're reported to be pushing further east to Ras Lanuf. We begin our coverage this news hour with Lawrence Lee.
Whatever the military capabilities of the opponents of Gaddafi's regime, they certainly don't lack spirit. This is the city of Misrata, which on Sunday morning the government in Tripoli said had been reclaimed by pro-Gaddafi forces. It certainly doesn't look like it now. By the end of Sunday, the government was trying to suggest something different, that they've made a conscious decision not to cause too much death and destruction.
One of the brigades took the repositioned and didn't want to engage in the fighting. And despite that, the locals managed to capture 37 of the militia groups.
Despite Gaddafi's obvious advantage of having aircraft and helicopters, one of the striking aspects of this conflict has been how inaccurate the bombing has been. While it's true that some weapons dumps have been destroyed, in many places the warplanes have continually missed their targets, and now and again are even shot down by aging men who freely admit to having never manned an anti-aircraft gun in their entire life before this. It all raises intriguing questions. Are Gaddafi's pilots incapable of shooting straight? Are they missing targets on purpose? And if so, is it because they don't want to hit them, or is it because they're under orders to frighten rather than kill?
When we arrived, we didn't find any opposition because the people here are good. The people welcome us and greet us. But when we were inside, 2 Mirage planes overflew us and 1 helicopter. They wanted to shoot, but we shot them first.
All the same, if there are questions over the aptitude of the Libyan military, then the same must go for the rebel forces, whose advance on Bin Jawad and Sirte appears to have been disorganized and led to casualties, threatening to overwhelm this little hospital in Ras Lanuf. Some of these pictures suggest a desire to fight is all well and good until the reality of armed battle hits home. There's also the separate issue of whether civilian supporters of Gaddafi in places like Sirte or Tripoli are prepared to arm themselves against a rebel advance, and if so, what that would mean for either side's moral authority. If you add it all together, it suggests a conflict which could destroy this country. Lawrence Lee, AlJazeera.
So we talked about the government forces pushing their way east. The opposition forces, of course, started in the east, trying to battle their way west towards Muammar Gaddafi's hometown and stronghold, that is Sirte. One key hotspot, though, is the oil refining town of Brega, and that's where we join our correspondent Jackie Rowland now. Jackie.
Yes, well, I'm talking to you from Brega Hospital, where we've been talking to doctors about the casualties of the latest fighting. Now, they've told me that as a result of the fighting around the town of Bin Jawad on Sunday, they treated, at the hospital of Ras Lanuf, just down the road from here, they treated 42 injured people, and they also said that there were 8 people who were killed in the fighting. Now, today, Tuesday, so far the situation we're having reported from Ras Lanuf is that it's quiet, but I think it's significant that the advance of the rebels does seem to have run into some problem, run into some resistance from the pro-Gaddafi forces, who maybe are sending the rebels a message that if they hope to try to advance on Sirte, then they should prepare themselves for heavy fighting every kilometre of the way.
The rebels are edging closer and closer to the Gaddafi heartlands. The territory they call Free Libya now extends almost as far west as Bin Jawad. That's just 200 kilometres from Gaddafi's hometown of Sirte.
We advanced to Bin Jawad and we discovered that Gaddafi troops had recruited teenagers and made them stand on the rooftops to shoot at us. After that, we decided to withdraw from Bin Jawad to work out a new strategy to return and capture the town.
The rebels are chaotic and living on their nerves. Their mood swings from panic to euphoria. But their great strength lies in the conviction that they are liberating their country. The skies are clear again after a sandstorm that lasted several days, and good visibility means enemy aircraft.
The rebels are vulnerable from the sky. The pro-Gaddafi forces have aircraft, the opposition fighters don't. It's their one really big disadvantage.
Capturing territory and capturing enemy soldiers too. The rebels take us to see a man they've been holding prisoner since Friday. He tells me he's a conscript in the Libyan army.
The army asked me what my specialty was. They posted me as a sentry and said, if you leave, we will shoot you.
Gaddafi's army may outgun the rebels, but the rebels outnumber the army. New volunteers are joining all the time and their morale is high. Just as well, since the heaviest fighting may still lie ahead.
Back to Jackie Rowland now at the hospital there in Braga. Tell me, Jackie, about the sorts of injuries, the casualties that are coming in. What are they like?
Well, this is something that is particularly noteworthy. The doctors here in Braga say that the vast majority of people they treat are men who've been injured by their own weapons, accidents. They say it boils down to the fact that all these men are volunteering to fight at the front line. They're men who have no previous military experience, who've never handled a weapon before. So it's hardly surprising that bullets are flying off in every direction. We've seen it ourselves at the various checkpoints, complete novices getting to play essentially with some pretty serious equipment. One doctor told me that he saw a man who was injured, and what had happened was he'd sat with a heavy machine gun that had been mounted on some kind of vehicle. The man had pushed the button and the machine gun had started rotating and rotating, and he couldn't figure out how to switch it off again. So a lot of these injuries and even people being killed are a result of accidents, and it really does underline once again the lack of experience and the lack of discipline within this rebel army.
And how well equipped would you say is the hospital and the doctors to deal with any influx of patients? I spoke to a doctor in, I think it was Misrata yesterday, who was basically crying out for help and for supplies.
Well, yes, I mean, the problem obviously is that when fighting is close to hospitals themselves, then that clearly puts not only patients but also doctors in danger. For example, the hospital in Ras Lanuf, that was the closest hospital to the fighting on Sunday. The first casualties were brought to Ras Lanuf, but during the night of Sunday to Monday, we heard that the hospital at Ras Lanuf had closed and the casualties were being moved further up the line. So here in Braga, they get some wounded, but most of the more seriously injured people are transferred right up to AlJazeera, which is about 40 minutes from here. And yes, you're right, doctors have been complaining about a lack of dressings, a lack of medicine to deal with these problems. But I think it's also just the pure physical danger for the doctors. I mean, the doctors here have said to me, it's not primarily, the fighting isn't their first concern, it's this whole atmosphere of insecurity. The fact that undisciplined people, men who've just come and volunteered, who've never handled a weapon before, are just firing off guns in the streets. And also the psychological effect this is having on the civilian population. One doctor told me that he saw 51 patients yesterday who all had signs of trauma and stress, high blood pressure, headaches. This is putting a huge psychological toll on the ordinary people living in this part of Libya.
Some great insight into the situation in Braga from Jackie Rowland there. Thank you, Jackie. Talked about Misrata earlier, the scene of more fighting in the last few hours. It is a city where the opposition's National Council, as they call it, is trying to establish a presence.